Imagine the map. Not the neat, clean lines of a textbook, but a living, breathing, bleeding map of the Pacific Ocean in the spring of 1942. It is a map painted in two colors, the blood red of the rising sun, spreading, consuming an unstoppable tide, and the desperate, fading blue of American resistance. And in a war room in Tokyo, or on the bridge of a mighty aircraft carrier, a Japanese admiral, a king of this new ocean, allows himself a thin, contemptuous smile. He looks at the American fleet, battered, retreating from the Philippines, from Wake Island, from the Java Sea. He looks at their aircraft carriers, few in number. He looks at their pilots, green, untested boys. And he scorns them. He scorns their equipment. He scorns their training. He scorns their very will to fight. This arrogance, this utter, profound, and fatal underestimation of the American spirit is where our story begins. It's a story that will culminate in a single, breathtaking moment. A moment when the sky itself would tear open. A moment when, in just 11 minutes, the course of a world war would be irrevocably bent, not by kings or admirals, but by a handful of brave men in cockpits, screaming towards their destiny at 250 knots. This is the story of the Battle of Midway. But before we get to the 11 minutes that changed everything, we have to understand the depth of the scorn. We have to feel the weight of the odds. We have to meet the men who were told they couldn't win, and who decided to write a different ending. Let's set the stage. It's April 1942. America is on the ropes. Pearl Harbor was less than 6 months ago, a raw, suppurating wound in the national psyche. The Philippines have fallen, the infamous Bataan Death March is underway, a nightmare of cruelty that was only just beginning to be whispered about. The British have lost Singapore. The Dutch East Indies are gone. The Empire of Japan is riding a wave of victory that seems, to the entire world, completely unstoppable. Their tool of conquest? The Kido Butai, the Imperial Japanese Navy's first air fleet. It is, without question, the most powerful naval striking force ever assembled in human history. 6 fleet aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaki, and Zuikiki. Veterans of Pearl Harbor, of Darwin, of Ceylon. Their decks are packed with the finest naval aircraft in the world. The agile, deadly A-6M Zerosen fighter, a plane so nimble it seems to defy physics. The rugged, accurate Aichi D-3 Val dive bomber. The lethal Naima B-5 N-Kate torpedo bomber. These are not just machines. They are extensions of the pilots themselves. The cream of the Japanese Naval Aviation Corps. Men with hundreds, sometimes thousands of hours of flight time, hardened in the forge of combat over China and the early Pacific campaigns. They are, in their own minds and in the eyes of their enemies, invincible. And their commanders? Men like Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind Pearl Harbor. A complex, brilliant strategist who understood America's industrial might, but believed Japan could deliver one final, knockout blow to shatter its will. And men like Admiral Chuchi Nagumo, commander of the Kido Butai. A cautious, solid, but ultimately conventional officer. A man who, by June 1942, had come to believe in his own invulnerability. To him, the American carriers were a nuisance, a final loose end to be tidied up. The American situation, by contrast, was dire. Out in the Pacific, holding the line, was a force that could charitably be called the underdogs. This was the U.S. Pacific Fleet, commanded by the quiet, unflappable Admiral Chester W. Nimitz. A man who bore the weight of a nation on his shoulders. His most potent weapons? 3 aircraft carriers. Just 3. First, the USS Enterprise, CV-6. The Big E. A tough, veteran ship, a home to a crew of salty dogs and determined airmen. Second, the USS Yorktown, CV-5. Recently mauled at the Battle of the Coral Sea, she'd been limping back to Pearl Harbor, her flight deck torn open, her innards scorched. Estimates said she needed 3 months in dry dock for repairs. Nimitz gave the shipyards 3 days. 3 days. The men worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and a desperate sense of purpose, patching her up with steel plates and sheer willpower. She sailed from Midway with repairmen still on board, welding and hammering as she went. And third, the USS Hornet, CV-8. The new kid. Her crew was still learning the intricate dance of carrier operations. And her air group, well, we'll get to her air group. Their aircraft? The workhorse of the US Navy was the Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber. A sturdy, reliable bird, but in the early days, it was often dismissed. It wasn't as fast as the Japanese Val. It didn't have the range, but it had one secret weapon we'll come back to. Then there was the Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighter. A tough, tubby little plane. Compared to the Zero, it was a brick. It couldn't climb with it, couldn't outturn it. American pilots called the Zero the paper kite, because it was so lightly built and nimble. Engaging a Zero in a dogfight in a Wildcat was, as one pilot put it, a good way to end up dead. The American pilots had to develop new tactics just to survive. The Thatch Weave, a desperate scissors maneuver dreamed up by the brilliant Lieutenant Commander Jimmy Thatch, using teamwork to cover each other's tails. And then, there was the torpedo bomber, the Grumman TBD Devastator. Oh, the Devastator. By 1942, it was already a relic. Obsolete. A slow, lumbering, low-flying whale of an airplane. Its top speed with a torpedo slung underneath was a pitiful 100 knots. It had to fly straight and level, low and slow, to drop its weapon effectively. For the pilots of Torpedo Squadron 8 on the Hornet, and their brothers on the Enterprise and Yorktown, climbing into a Devastator was like climbing into a coffin and waiting for someone to nail the lid shut. The Japanese admirals knew this. They looked at the American order of battle and they scoffed. Their intelligence, flawed and arrogant, suggested the American carriers were elsewhere, that the defenders of Midway would be a handful of Marines in outdated aircraft. They believed their own myth of invincibility so completely that they planned not just a battle, but an elaborate ambush, a complex trap with multiple prongs, sure that the stupid Americans would blunder right into it. They were so sure of their superiority, so certain of their destiny to rule the Pacific, that they failed to account for one critical, volatile, uniquely American ingredient: the ability to look a seemingly certain death in the face, and instead of surrendering, to get angry, to get clever, to adapt, to improvise, and to fight with a ferocity that no war plan, no matter how brilliant, could ever anticipate. Because while the Japanese admirals were planning their victory ceremony, American intelligence officers in a dank, windowless basement at Pearl Harbor were doing something extraordinary. They were breaking the Japanese naval code. They were reading Yamamoto's mail. They knew the target was AF. And through a brilliant, simple ruse, having Midway send a fake radio message about a broken water distiller, they confirmed that AF was Midway. They knew the date. They knew the approximate strength. Admiral Nimitz, the quiet chess master, now had his opponent's playbook. He could see the trap being laid. And he decided not to avoid it, but to spring a trap of his own. He would position his 3 carriers, his tiny, battered, patched-together fleet, to the northeast of Midway. He would wait. He would let the mighty Kido Butai sail right into his sights. The stage was set. The pieces were moving. The greatest naval battle of the Pacific War was about to begin, and it would hinge on the courage of men the enemy had already written off. But before the first plane could be launched, before the first shot was fired, we have to go down to the hangar decks. We have to look into the faces of the young men who would carry this immense weight. We have to meet them, because history is not about ships and planes. It's about the hearts that beat inside them. On the eve of battle, the atmosphere aboard the American carriers was a thick soup of fear, bravado, and a desperate, quiet hope. These weren't the seasoned veterans of the Kido Butai. These were kids. Most of the Dauntless and Devastator pilots were in their early 20s. Many had never seen combat. They'd trained in obsolete aircraft. They'd heard the stories of the Zero's invincibility. In the ready room of Torpedo Squadron 8 aboard the Hornet, Lieutenant Commander John C. Waldron, a tough, no-nonsense Sioux Indian from South Dakota, gathered his boys. Waldron was a character. He believed in instinct, in aggression. He'd written his own tactical manual, and he drilled his men relentlessly. He knew what they were flying. He knew the odds. He stood before them, his jaw set. "Men," he said, his voice cutting through the nervous silence, "I know you are worried. You should be. This is going to be a desperate fight. The enemy has superiority in numbers and experience. But they have one weakness. They are overconfident. He looked at each of them, these young faces, some barely out of high school. I want you to remember your training. Follow my orders. I want you to go in low, and I want you to go in hard. If there's only one plane left, I want that man to go in and get a hit. He paused, his eyes blazing with a fierce, almost paternal intensity. My God, he whispered, have mercy on us. May we be ready to meet him. But I hope we are ready to meet the devil too and give him hell. In another ready room, on the Enterprise, was Lieutenant Commander Clarence Wade McCluskey, the Air Group Commander. A cool, calculating, professional pilot. He wasn't a speechmaker. He was a navigator, a thinker. His job was to find the enemy. A task that, in the vast, empty expanse of the Pacific, was like finding a needle in 1,000 haystacks. The fate of the entire battle would rest on his eyes, his judgment, his calm under pressure. And on the patched-up Yorktown, men were trying to sleep, trying to write letters home, trying to pretend this was just another day. The air was thick with the smell of fuel oil, sweat, and the faint, metallic tang of fear. They could all feel it. The clock was ticking down. The two most powerful fleets in the Pacific were steaming towards each other, blind, in the night. The sun was about to rise on June 4, 1942. A day that would dawn with what seemed like certain Japanese victory. A day that would see unimaginable sacrifice and unbelievable heroism. The Japanese admirals, confident in their scorn, were about to launch the first wave against Midway Island itself. They were about to step onto the stage, believing the theater was empty. But lurking just over the horizon, waiting in the early morning fog, were 3 U.S. aircraft carriers. And on their decks, 216 planes were being armed, fueled, and prepared for war. The question was, could they find the enemy fleet in time? And if they did, could they possibly break through the invincible shield of the Zero? The answer would come from the sky, in a storm of fire and steel. And it would all happen in a span of time so short, so concentrated, it would defy belief. Stick with me, because in our next part, the search begins, the first tragic acts unfold, and we witness the moment when American desperation collides head-on with Japanese arrogance. You won't want to miss what happens next. Dawn, June 4, 1942. A pale, gray light bleeds across the eastern horizon, revealing a sea of glassy calm. Aboard the American carriers, there is no sunrise ceremony. No inspirational speeches over the loudspeaker. Just a coiled, electric tension that has everyone on edge. On the flag bridge of the USS Enterprise, Admiral Raymond Spruance, a man of intense, quiet intellect who had taken command only days before, stares into the pre-dawn murk. He is not a flamboyant leader like his superior, Bull Halsey, who is back in Pearl, sidelined by a skin disease. Spruance is a chess player, a calculator, and he is about to make the most critical decision of the entire battle, a decision that will go against all conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom said you launch your entire air group in one massive, coordinated strike. But to do that, you had to find the enemy first. And the search planes, those slow, lumbering PBY Catalinas flying from Midway, had yet to report a thing. The ocean was vast, empty, and silent. Then, at 5:55 a.m., the silence is shattered. It's the first sighting. A PBY has spotted the Japanese strike force, over 100 planes, barreling towards the tiny atoll of Midway. The island, a speck of sand and concrete, is about to take a beating it will never forget. But for Spruance, this is only half the puzzle. He needs the carriers. Where are the Japanese carriers? The PBYs are searching, scanning the endless blue, minute by agonizing minute ticking by. Aboard the American ships, every officer, every sailor, is holding their breath. They are blind, and they know the enemy can see them. The tension is a physical weight. Then at 6:03 a.m., the radio crackles to life again. It's the message they've been waiting for. A young ensign in a PBY, his voice tight with excitement, sends the words that will ignite the battle. 2 carriers. The Keto Butai. They've been found. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Spruance doesn't hesitate. He doesn't wait to launch a perfectly coordinated strike. He knows the Japanese have already launched their planes at Midway. Their flight decks are vulnerable. Right now. This is the window. It might be the only one they get. He turns to his chief of staff. His order is simple, audacious, and incredibly risky. Launch the attack. The order echoes through the ship. A metallic clangor erupts across the flight deck. A voice booms over the loudspeaker. Pilots, man your planes. What follows is a scene of controlled chaos, a symphony of organized madness. The flight decks of the Enterprise and Hornet become a maelstrom of roaring engines, shouting crewmen, and the shriek of wind. Men in colored jerseys dart between spinning propellers, arms signaling, guiding aircraft into position. The smell of high-octane avgas fills the air, so thick you can taste it. This is the moment. This is the launch. But it is not the famous 11-minute launch. Not yet. This is the launch of the search and destroy mission. And it is about to go terribly, tragically wrong. Because the American air groups, in their desperation to strike fast, are about to fly into a meat grinder. They are about to pay a blood price so high, so horrifying, that it will seem like the battle is already lost. First into the air are the fighters. Wildcats from the Enterprise and Hornet claw for altitude, their engines straining. Then go the dauntless dive bombers, their perforated dive flaps rattling. And finally, the slow, heavy, vulnerable devastators are pushed into the sky. The plan, such as it is for the squadrons to form up and fly together. Fighters high for cover, dive bombers at medium altitude, torpedo planes low. But in the rush, in the confusion of the launch, and in the sheer vastness of the sky, the plan falls apart before it even begins. The Hornet's air group, led by Commander Stanhope Ring, makes a fateful navigational decision. They fly due west, on a course that they believe will intercept the enemy. But it is a course that will lead them to a nothing, an empty ocean. They will fly until their fuel gauges dip into the red and be forced to turn back, many ditching in the sea, having never seen the Japanese fleet. It is a disastrous waste of precious aircraft and brave men. The Enterprise's air group, led by the steady McCluskey, flies the predicted course. But as they reach the estimated point of interception, nothing. Just blue water stretching to the horizon. McCluskey's heart must have sunk into his boots. He was given one job, find the enemy. And he has failed. But Wade McCluskey is not a man who gives up easily. He makes a critical choice. He decides to extend the search. He knows his fuel is limited. He knows every minute he flies north is a minute less he has to fight to get home. But he presses on. He is gambling everything. His life, the lives of his men, the fate of the battle, on a hunch. And while McCluskey is searching, the torpedo squadrons arrive. Imagine the scene from the deck of the Japanese aircraft carrier Akagi. The morning has been a triumph. Their strike on Midway has been successful, though the American defenders on the island have put up a ferocious fight. Admiral Nagumo is now considering his next move. Should he rearm his planes with bombs for a second strike on the island, or with torpedoes in case the American fleet appears? It is at this moment of confusion, this critical window of vulnerability, that a lookout screams a warning. Enemy torpedo planes, low on the water, bearing red 90. It is Torpedo Squadron 8 from the Hornet. John Waldron's boys. They have found the Kido Butai, alone, without fighter cover. They are the first American planes to reach the enemy fleet. What happens next is not a battle. It is a slaughter. The devastators, slow and low, are sitting ducks. The Japanese combat air patrol, dozens of Zeros, scream down from above like angry hornets. The sky fills with the black puffs of flak and the brilliant, lethal tracers of machine gun fire arcing towards the American planes in graceful, deadly curves. The devastators begin to die. One by one, they are torn apart. A fuel tank explodes, engulfing a plane in a fireball that briefly dances on the water before sinking. A wing is sheared off, the aircraft cartwheeling into the sea. The radio chatter is a nightmare of calm, professional voices being abruptly cut off. Joe's hit. I'm on fire. Good luck, guys. Waldron's plane is one of the first to go. He flies straight into the storm, his Devastator riddled with bullets, until it plows into the water. Not a single one of Torpedo Squadron 8's 15 planes survives. Of the 30 men, only one, Ensign George Gay, will live. He will float in the water, wounded, watching the entire battle unfold around him, a lone, helpless witness to hell. But the sacrifice is not over. Just minutes later, Torpedo Squadron 6 from the Enterprise arrives. They see the smoke and wreckage of VT-8 still fresh on the water. They know what awaits them. And without hesitation, they press their attack. The Zeros fall upon them. The slaughter is repeated. The Devastators are methodically annihilated. 10 planes go in. Only 4 survive to drop their torpedoes. None of those torpedoes hit. Then, the Yorktown's Torpedo Squadron 3 arrives. The same story. The same brave, hopeless charge. More Zeros, more flak, more young men spiraling into the sea. They manage to get a few torpedoes away, but the Japanese carriers, skillfully maneuvered, comb the tracks, avoiding them with ease. In the span of less than an hour, 3 American torpedo squadrons have been virtually wiped out. Over 40 planes lost. Dozens of the Navy's best and bravest pilots and aircrew dead. And they have not scored a single hit. On the bridge of the Akagi, Admiral Nagumo allows himself a moment of satisfaction. The American attack has been crushed. Their obsolete planes and inexperienced pilots have been no match for his veterans. His scorn seems justified. The sky is clear. The threat is eliminated. He orders his fleet to turn into the wind. It is time to recover his Midway strike force and then rearm to finish off the American carriers, which he now knows are out there. He believes he has won. But high above this carnage, at 20,000 feet, 2 men are watching. Wade McCluskey, leading 32 Dauntless dive bombers from the Enterprise, has been searching for what feels like an eternity. His fuel is critically low. He is about to give the order to turn back when he sees something. A tiny, white scratch on the vast blue canvas of the ocean. It's the wake of a ship. A Japanese destroyer, the Arisher, racing north at full speed. McCluskey reasons, with the cold logic of a hunter, that a destroyer speeding alone must be trying to catch up to something. It's fleet. He makes his second critical decision of the day. Follow that destroyer. He banks his SBDs to the north. They follow the tiny wake for mile after agonizing mile. The fuel gauges dip lower. Men are sweating not just from the heat, but from the fear of ditching hundreds of miles from home. And then they crest a cloud bank. And there, laid out below them like toys in a bathtub, is the entire Japanese 1st Carrier Strike Force. 4 aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, steaming in a box formation, their decks crowded with planes being rearmed and refueled. Bombs and torpedoes are stacked haphazardly on the decks. Fuel hoses are snaked everywhere. It is the most target-rich environment any pilot could ever dream of. And there is not a Zero in sight. The entire Japanese fighter cover is down at sea level, having just butchered the torpedo planes. The sky above the carriers is empty. McCluskey cannot believe his luck. He keys his radio. His voice is calm, steady, the voice of a man who has just found the key to victory. McCluskey to group, attack target. Best luck. At almost the exact same moment, the Yorktown's dive bomber squadron, led by the cool-headed Max Leslie, arrives from the southeast. They too see the pristine, undefended carriers. The stage is set. The sacrifice of the torpedo squadrons was not in vain. They were the anvil. They drew the Japanese fighters down to the deck. Now, the hammer is about to fall from the heavens. 2 groups of American Dauntless dive bombers, from 2 different carriers, have arrived over the Japanese fleet at the same time by pure, unadulterated chance. Or was it chance? Or was it the result of desperate courage, smart decisions, and a little bit of that American luck that so infuriated the Axis? The Japanese admirals, so confident in their scorn, are about to look up and see their doom screaming down at them at a 70-degree angle. The next 11 minutes will decide the war in the Pacific. What happens when a single 1,000-pound bomb, dropped with pinpoint accuracy, lands on a flight deck crammed with fueled planes, armed bombs, and snaking fuel lines? The answer is an apocalypse. Don't go away. The most dramatic, explosive, and world-changing 11 minutes in naval history are coming up, right after this. 10:20 a.m. The air is thin and cold at 20,000 feet. Below, the Japanese fleet is a perfect, miniature tableau of naval power. 4 great carriers, plowing through the Pacific swells, their white wakes like brushstrokes on a blue canvas. To the American dive bomber pilots peering through their gun sights, it looks peaceful. In the cockpit of his Dauntless, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey takes a final, deep breath from his oxygen mask. He has led his 32 planes from the Enterprise on a hunt that nearly ended in empty fuel tanks and a watery grave. Now, he has found the prize. And the prize is utterly unaware. He keys his microphone. No grand speech. No dramatic pronouncement. Just 4 simple, world-changing words. McCluskey to group. Attack target. What happens next is a ritual of death, a ballet of precision and violence perfected over countless training hours. One by one, the dauntless pilots push their control sticks forward. The sturdy planes, almost standing on their noses, begin their descent. This is not a gentle dive. This is a near-vertical plunge. The world outside the canopy transforms. The blue sky whirls away, replaced by the dizzying, rushing view of the ocean and the ships, growing larger with terrifying speed. They flip a switch, and the air is torn by a sound that will become the stuff of Japanese nightmares. The screaming, wailing dive siren of the Dauntless. It's a psychological weapon, a banshee's shriek designed to paralyze those on the ground. And on the decks of the Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, it works. Men look up, their faces frozen in a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. For the pilots, it's a sensory overload. The G-forces press them into their seats, their vision tunneling. The wind screams past the canopy. The altimeter unwinds like a spinning top. 15,000 feet. 12,000. 10,000. They are human projectiles, aiming themselves at a spot on a moving ship 250 feet wide. Down on the flag bridge of the Akagi, Admiral Nagumo is finally receiving the report he dreaded. The American carrier has been found. He had just made the decision to rearm his planes with torpedoes to go after it. His deck is a chaotic arsenal. Bombs taken from the second-wave attack planes are stacked haphazardly. Long, sleek torpedoes are being wheeled up from the magazines. Fuel hoses are everywhere, snaking across the deck, pumping high-octane avgas into waiting aircraft. He is at his most vulnerable. And that is the exact moment the sirens begin to scream from the sky. A young officer on the bridge of the Akagi points a trembling finger upward. His voice is a strangled cry. Hell divers! The Americans had arrived. McCluskey doesn't go for the lead carrier. He makes a split-second tactical decision. He splits his force. He leads one division towards the Kaga, a massive ship, a converted battleship hull, a giant waiting to be slain. The dive is sheer, unadulterated terror and focus. Pilots are fighting the stick, their arms trembling, trying to hold the pipper of their gun sight on a specific point, the large, red Hinomaru, the rising sun, painted amidships on the flight deck. On the Kaga, the anti-aircraft guns open up. The sky fills with black, puffball explosions. Tracers, glowing red and green, arc up in lazy, beautiful, deadly curves. But it's too little too late. The dive bombers are coming in too fast, too steep. The first plane to release is that of Lieutenant Clarence Dickinson. He feels his plane leap upward, relieved of the weight of its 1,000-pound bomb. He pulls back hard on the stick, the G-forces pushing him down into his seat, the blood draining from his head. He fights blackness, straining to see over his shoulder. His bomb is a thing of perfect, terrible beauty. It seems to hang in the air for a moment, then descends in a near-perpendicular line. It strikes the Kaga's flight deck just aft of amidships, a direct hit on the red sun. The result is not just an explosion. It is a cataclysm. The bomb punches through the wooden flight deck and detonates in the hangar deck below. This is where the planes of the second wave are parked, being rearmed and refueled. The 1,000-pound bomb ignites a fuel fire. That fire touches off a bomb. That bomb touches off a torpedo. The Kaga is consumed in a chain reaction of apocalyptic violence. The entire aft section of the ship becomes a single, roaring fireball. The heat is so intense it melts steel, warps the flight deck into grotesque shapes. Men are vaporized. Others, ablaze from head to toe, leap into the sea. In less than 60 seconds, the mighty Kaga is transformed from the pride of the Imperial Navy into a floating crematorium. But the horror is only beginning. While McCluskey's men are obliterating the Kaga, the Enterprise's scouting squadron, led by Lieutenant Wilmer Earl Gallagher, peels off and attacks the flagship, Akagi. Admiral Nagumo watches, powerless, as the Dauntless fall upon his ship. The first bomb is a near miss, a geyser of water erupting alongside the hull, rocking the great ship. The second bomb is the killer. It strikes the Akagi's flight deck near the aft elevator. Just like on the Kaga, it punches through and detonates in the hangar deck. The same scene of hellish chaos unfolds. Fuel, bombs, torpedoes, and aircraft are fused into a single, white-hot inferno. The ship's internal telephone system reports one final, chilling message from the engine room before going silent. There is a short circuit in the electrical system. It is impossible to control the engines. The Akagi, the very heart of the Kido Butai, is dead in the water, a blazing wreck. And then the third carrier. From the southeast, arriving as if on cue from some divine stage manager, comes the Yorktown's dive bomber squadron, led by Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie. They see the Kaga and Akagi already burning, pillars of thick, black smoke rising thousands of feet into the sky. Their target is clear, the Soryu. Leslie's dive is just as precise, just as merciless. 3 bombs hit the Soryu in quick succession. 1 forward, 1 amidships, 1 aft. The effect is instantaneous and total. The ship is engulfed from stem to stern. Within 20 minutes, the order is given to abandon ship. In the span of 5 minutes, from 10:25 to 10:30 a.m., the strategic situation of the entire Pacific War has been reversed. 3 of the 4 carriers that struck Pearl Harbor are now blazing hulks, their aircraft, their experienced air crews, and their commanding admirals neutralized. The scorn of the Japanese High Command has been met with the unforgiving reality of American courage, ingenuity, and sheer, explosive force. But the battle is not over. There is a 4th carrier. The Hiryu, trailing a few miles behind the main formation, has been spared the initial onslaught. Its commander, the aggressive Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, sees the pillars of smoke on the horizon and knows immediately what has happened. But unlike Nagumo, Yamaguchi does not freeze. He strikes back. He quickly launches a counterstrike. A wave of Vals and Zeros finds the American fleet, and their target is the USS Yorktown. The patched-up, 3-day repair veteran becomes the focus of the Hiryu's rage. The Yorktown's combat air patrol, a mix of wildcats from all 3 carriers, puts up a ferocious fight. They shoot down many of the attacking Vals. But some get through. 3 bombs hit the Yorktown. 1 explodes deep in the stack, snuffing out the fires in her boilers, bringing her to a dead stop. Another starts a fierce fire. The ship is wounded, but her damage control parties, trained to a fine edge, fight back with incredible bravery. They patch the holes, put out the fires, and within 2 hours, they have her underway again, making 20 knots. The American fleet believes they have weathered the storm. But Admiral Yamaguchi is not done. He launches a 2nd strike. And this one is armed with torpedoes. The second wave finds the Yorktown, now moving but still vulnerable. The Wildcats are low on fuel and ammunition. They can't stop them all. 2 torpedoes slam into the Yorktown's port side. The blows are mortal. The list becomes severe, 26 degrees and increasing. Water pours in. The great ship is dying. At 3 p.m., the order is given, abandon ship. It is a gut-wrenching moment for the American sailors. They had saved her once, only to lose her now. They slide down ropes into the oily, cold water, watching as their home, their fortress, begins to roll over on her side. But her story is not over yet. Because while the Hiryu was launching its attacks, the Americans had found her. Scout planes from the Yorktown, before she was hit, had radioed the Hiryu's position. And now, late in the afternoon, a final, vengeful strike is launched from the Enterprise. 24 dauntless dive bombers, including 10 from the orphaned Yorktown Air Group, led by the irrepressible Wade McCluskey once more, head out. They find the Hiryu, her deck crowded with planes being prepared for a final, twilight strike. The scene from the morning repeats itself. 4 direct hits. The Hiryu is transformed into a blazing torch. By nightfall on June 4th, all 4 Japanese carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor are either at the bottom of the Pacific or soon will be. The Kido Butai, the invincible spearhead of the Imperial Japanese Navy, has been annihilated. The 11-minute dive bombing attack was the pivot point, the fulcrum upon which history turned. But it was paid for with American blood. The torpedo squadrons were slaughtered. The Yorktown was mortally wounded. The cost was immense. The Japanese admirals who had scorned the U.S. carriers, who had believed their pilots inferior and their equipment obsolete, had been proven fatally, catastrophically wrong. Their arrogance lay shattered and burning on the waves, a testament to a simple, powerful truth. You can judge a machine, but you can never underestimate the heart of the man who flies it. The battle is over, but the aftermath is just beginning. What does this staggering victory mean? How do the survivors pick up the pieces? And what happens to the mighty Yorktown? The final, emotional chapter of the Battle of Midway is next. Nightfall, June 4th, 1942. The Pacific is vast and dark, a black canvas smeared with the orange and red of dying ships. The air, once filled with the scream of engines and the thunder of bombs, is now heavy with a new sound. The cries of the wounded, the shouts of rescuers, and the deafening silence of immense loss. On the American task forces, there is no cheering, no triumphant celebration. There is only exhaustion, a deep, bone-weary fatigue that comes from having stared into the abyss and, by some miracle, having forced it to blink first. Sailors slump at their battle stations, their faces smudged with soot and sweat, their hands trembling from spent adrenaline. They've won. But they've also lost. The USS Yorktown, the ship that refused to die, lists grievously in the water, a dark and silent shape against the star-filled sky. Around her, destroyers move like nervous sheepdogs, their searchlights cutting beams through the darkness, picking out the bobbing heads of her crew, swimming in the chill water. The evacuation is a scene of grim order amidst chaos. Men slide down ropes into the waiting whaleboats below. They sing, softly at first, then with more conviction, "Don't give up the ship." Their voice is a thin, brave defiance against the night. They have given up their ship, but not their spirit. Not yet. And on the bridge of the Enterprise, Admiral Scorned, the quiet chess master, makes another brilliant, cautious move. He turns his fleet east, away from the enemy, into the darkness. He will not be drawn into a night surface battle against a still powerful Japanese surface fleet. He has won the carrier duel. He will not gamble that victory away. It is a decision that cements the victory, a testament to a mind that understands war is not just about dealing blows, but about knowing when to step back and let those blows take their effect. But while the American fleet licks its wounds and saves its men, the sea around Midway becomes a charnel house for the Imperial Japanese Navy. Imagine the scene aboard the dying Kaga. The fires have burned themselves out, leaving a scorched, steel skeleton. The few survivors huddle on the bow, the only part of the ship not submerged in the inferno. They can feel the great ship's death throes, the groans and shudders as it prepares to slip beneath the waves. A Japanese destroyer pulls alongside, and as men scramble across lines, the order is given: abandon ship. For the captain, Jisaku Okada, there is no abandonment. He chooses to go down with his ship, a final, solemn act of responsibility for the catastrophe. The Soryu follows, its internal explosions tearing it apart before it makes its final plunge. The Hiryu, stubborn to the end, is still afloat, but it is a floating hell. Admiral Yamaguchi, the aggressive commander who had launched the counterstrikes that wounded the Yorktown, gathers his crew on the wrecked flight deck. He and the ship's captain, Tomio Kaku, decide their fate. They will not be captured. They will not leave their ship. As the sun rises on June 5th, the order to abandon is given for the Hiryu. Yamaguchi and Kaku stand together, watching their men leave. They are last seen, according to survivors, saluting as the destroyers pull away. Then, they walk back into the smoke and shadows of their bridge to await the end. The Hiryu is scuttled by Japanese torpedoes, a final, merciful blow. And then there is the flagship, Akagi. Admiral Nagumo, the man who had scorned the American threat, is forced to transfer his command to a cruiser. The humiliation must have been absolute. His mighty fleet, the instrument of Japan's destiny, is gone. He stands on the deck of the cruiser Nagara, watching his flagship burn. The Akagi, like the Hiryu, is too wounded to save. A Japanese destroyer is ordered to send her to the bottom with torpedoes. As the fish slam into her side, the Akagi rolls over and vanishes into the deep, taking with her the bodies of 267 of her crew. In the span of a single day, Japan has lost not just 4 aircraft carriers, but over 3,000 of its most experienced sailors, pilots, and aircraft mechanics. This is a loss from which the Imperial Japanese Navy will never recover. The skilled, veteran core of their naval air arm is gone, vaporized in the fires of those 4 carriers. They can build new ships, but they cannot build new experience, not in time to win this war. The tide of the Pacific War has not just turned, it has reversed with the force of a tsunami. But our story cannot end with the sinking of the carriers. Because the human cost of victory demands to be counted. It demands to be remembered. Let's go back to the water. To Ensign George Gay of Torpedo Squadron 8. 4 hours he has floated alone, his life raft a tiny speck in an immense ocean. He watched his entire squadron be wiped out. He saw his friends and his commander, John Waldron, die. He saw the dive bombers arrive like avenging angels. He saw the carriers burn. He played dead when Japanese ships passed nearby, hiding under the floating debris and the bodies of his comrades. He is the sole survivor of VT-8. 1 man out of 30. His survival is a miracle, but it is a miracle wrapped in unimaginable trauma. When he is finally rescued days later, he will carry the weight of being the lone witness for the rest of his life. And what of the Yorktown? Her story has one more, heartbreaking chapter. The Americans are not ready to give up on her. On June 6th, a salvage team is put back aboard the derelict carrier. It's a ghost ship, silent, dark, and listing. But the damage control parties go to work again. They shore up bulkheads, they patch holes. There is a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they can tow her home. But the Japanese are not quite finished. The submarine 168, lurking in the depths, has found her. It slips past the destroyer screen and fires a spread of torpedoes. 2 slam into the Yorktown's wounded hull. A third hits the destroyer USS Hammond, which is tied alongside providing power. The Hammond is blown in half and sinks in minutes, taking many of her crew with her. The Yorktown's wounds are now truly mortal. She fights for her life through the night of June 6th and into the morning of the 7th. But the sea will not be denied. At dawn on June 7, 1942, the USS Yorktown finally rolls over and sinks beneath the waves. She takes 141 of her crew with her, a final, tragic sacrifice on the altar of victory. She lies there now, on the bottom of the Pacific, a tomb for brave men and a monument to one of the most incredible comebacks in naval history. So, what are we to make of this? The Battle of Midway was more than a victory of ships and planes. It was a victory of intellect, the codebreakers who gave Nimitz the playbook. It was a victory of command, Spruance's calm, calculated audacity. It was a victory of engineering, the rugged dauntless dive bomber, the tool the enemy scorned that became the weapon of their destruction. But above all, it was a victory of the human spirit. It was the relentless search of Wade McCluskey, pushing on past the point of no return. It was the sacrificial charge of John Waldron and the torpedo squadrons, who flew into certain death to create an opportunity for others. It was the insane bravery of the Yorktown's damage control parties, who refused to let their ship die until it was finally torn from their grasp. The Japanese admirals scorned the U.S. carriers. They scorned the American pilots. They believed in a myth of their own racial and technological superiority, and that arrogance was their fatal flaw, because they underestimated the most powerful force in the world, the force of free men fighting with their backs against the wall, armed with courage, ingenuity, and an unshakable belief in their cause. The 11 minutes that changed the world were not a fluke. They were the culmination of all of that. They were the moment when American grit met its moment and proved that no foe, no matter how powerful or how arrogant, is invincible. The echoes of those 11 minutes reverberate through history. They echo in the freedom we enjoy today. They are a permanent reminder that underestimation is a poison, and that resilience, brotherhood, and raw courage are the antidote. So the next time you face a challenge that seems insurmountable, when the odds are stacked against you and the experts have written you off, remember the dive bombers at 20,000 feet. Remember the men who followed a hunch and a destroyer's wake. Remember the sacrifice of the torpedo squadrons. And remember that sometimes the course of history and of your own life can change in the space of a few unforgiving minutes. You just have to have the courage to push the stick forward and dive. Thank you for listening.